So if it's all right, we will start with hearing from Gavin Last. Gavin is the Executive Director of the Food Safety and Inspection Branch of BC Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries. Gavin's responsible for administering the Food Safety and Inspection Program, which is charged with maintaining or improving food safety, industry support, and livestock health and welfare in British Columbia. He provides planning, advice, best practice policy and analysis, evaluation and performance management for program implementation and administration, including control of financial and human resources, and ensuring delivery of inspection services for those regulated sectors under the Ministry of Agriculture, including seafood inspection and provincial meat inspection. Gavin, the floor is yours.
So I'm here today to talk about the new regulations that came into force last year. New licenses, there's a new framework with different types of licenses and some changes to the existing ones. Quick reference to premises ID and labeling requirements and our training and a little bit of other extra information. So came into force in October 1st. We've done pretty significant consultation over a number of years, 2018 to 2021, roughly speaking, although there was this questions and seeking input from the public and all stakeholders around small scale meat production has been going on for years in the province. I'd go back recent history to 2018. The Select Standing Committee on Agriculture, Fish and Food produced a report with 21 recommendations, all of which were taken, accepted by government as being good things to do. And then moving forward with those ideas, and after some smaller consultation efforts, released in what we called an intentions paper, where started to describe some of the suggestions in more of a, what if we tried this kind of an approach. Had 88 submissions received while it was available for comment, all of which was pretty consistent with the kinds of things that we've been hearing over years about the complexity of the system, the restrictions, and the need for more capacity. So we brought in changes to the legislation to reflect this, changes to the meat inspection regs. I'm going to describe some of these new licenses for you. The first of which we called Farmgate. This is a brand new license. It's available province-wide. It is really considered to be an entry-level kind of license. This is for small-scale and new producers who want to try this out and see what it feels like. See if they maybe want to explore getting into it at a much higher level. So it's limited to 5,000 pounds a year, and that's live weight. All of the production limits are live weight. They can only do their own animals. There's no bringing in animals from other producers, no custom work. They can sell their product at the farm gate or at farmers markets that are within the license holder's regional district, and farmers markets that are within 50 kilometers. And that's to deal with situations where, say, you've got a farm, and on the other side of the road, which also happens to be the regional district boundary, you've got a farmer's market where you have an opportunity to sell that. So we want to make sure that it's not constrained kind of artificially by a boundary like that. So that's what the 50 kilometer provision is about. We intend to inspect these at least once a year. That's our goal, and more depending on risk rating, how things go. If somebody turns out to be having some problems, we'll try and get out there more often. Products as before with the previous Class D and E type facilities have to be labeled, not government inspected. New requirement is the one to have a premises ID on the label to assist with traceability. And we've also introduced a new 5-year license term that wasn't there before. And that's going to help with administration, but also with the requirements for ensuring that people are up to date with things like training and compliance with the requirements. So the next license, and this is really the biggest change in the framework, we're calling Farmgate Plus, because it's it's also a similar rural slaughter, doesn't, as with Class D and E previously, doesn't require the presence of an inspector. But with this, the big difference is that it's available province-wide. It's going to replace all of the Class D and E, or has replaced all of the Class D and E licenses. They automatically convert to this Farmgate Plus category. The production limit is the top end of what used to be a Class D that was much more limited in its availability, 25,000 pounds. Live weight, this one does allow for custom slaughter, so neighbors can bring their animals over as long as that production is included in the license holder's limit. So that's the that's the constraint on custom and processing their own animals. Allows for again another big change: direct sales to consumers, retail and restaurant sales anywhere in the province. So that, of course, brings anyone into the territory of permitting by the regional health authorities for a food premises, which you must have in order to do that kind of retail. But it is quite an expansion in the opportunity for sales. We're maintaining the requirement for a feasibility study that used to be attached to Class D and E licenses. Don't need a feasibility study for the Farmgate, the entry-level one, but for Farmgate Plus, if the proposed facility is within an hour of an existing licensed abattoir, which were formerly known as Class A and B, then we want to have that feasibility study still done. It's important for us to make sure that that the opportunity to use one of those existing facilities has been considered, and just to confirm that. So again, we want to make sure that we're visiting these facilities at least once a year, more if necessary. Same labeling, not government inspected, and premises ID, and a 5-year license term. So that is really the biggest or the most significant change to the framework. With the previous Class A and B licenses, what we've done is consolidated them into a single license that we call an abattoir license. All of the existing, or back in October, all of those A's and B's have been converted to this. It's all synchronized with existing practices and schedules for inspection, or providing inspectors to do that. These offer fully inspected meat production, no restrictions on their volumes or sales within BC. Of course, all of this is only for product to be sold within the province. It can't be crossing borders. This was done with the intention of no business disruption. As far as we know, we've achieved that. And again, that 5-year license term is another requirement, or a new part of that category. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the training that goes along with the rural slaughter for Farmgate and Farmgate Plus. We used to have a program called Slaughter Safe, We've done done quite a bit of updating and improvement to that course, and thought it was a good idea to change the title. So we're calling it Slaughter Right. Not only the content, but the nature of how we're delivering it as a self-paced coursework style of education, part of the licensing application program or process. We're continuing the focus as ever on the importance of food safety, slaughter hygiene, the design of the facility and equipment, animal welfare, and storage, meat keeping requirements. All of that included in the training. Part of the course includes the development of food safety and humane slaughter plans, standard operating procedures, all of which are necessary for licensing. This, as I said, is for Farmgate and Farmgate Plus, and will be the part of the confirmation of this will be an on-farm inspection to make sure that all of the operational requirements are being met. And then premises ID, we're requiring it for the labeling of all of the Farmgate and Farmgate Plus product, again, to assist with, particularly with traceability if necessary. We're anticipating, again, this was, we developed this this presentation a while ago. We're into early 2022, fingers crossed. The reg changes are going to come through to make premises ID mandatory. We believe that it strongly supports being prepared and our ability to respond in emergencies. And we've seen demonstrations of that during the last flooding event, going back to the wildfire season back in 2017. Premises ID helped at least 189 ranchers to be able to access their animals in evacuation zones, just helping out with all of that effort. Under the current voluntary system, we think there's about 64% of producers and all of the supply managed livestock premises are registered. So looking to improve on that if we can. And then labeling, after October of last year, we'll let producers use existing stock of labels packages that have the farm name and address, the description of contents, net weight and volume, all of that, and the not government inspected, but allowed to use that label with another sticker that indicates the new information, which is the premises ID. Each of the labels is slightly different for Farmgate and Farmgate Plus, and the required text is there, and it does make it clear. It's pretty much verbatim what's in the reg, and does also highlight that the product is not for resale; it's only for the use of the purchaser. And then lots of information on our website, lots of links where you can find more information about the new regs and any questions you might have about licensing your facilities. That's it. I think I'm at the end there. Yeah, that's my last slide. So if we have any questions, I'm happy to help out. If I don't know the answer immediately, we can always connect offline by email and do it that way.
Okay, I see one that popped up in chat while you were talking, Gavin, and maybe we'll take that one and Corinne's, and then we'll keep moving and people can circle back to chat so we make sure all the speakers have lots of time. That was great, thank you. Here's the question for Gavin. Are you still inspecting every slaughter and licensed former A and B abattoirs? Do you plan to visit Farmgate and Farmgate Plus while slaughter is underway to ensure they are following training requirements or random visits or both?
Yes. So first question, yes, nothing's changed in terms of A and B that we're now calling abattoirs. They can't operate without the presence of an inspector. That's a legislative requirement. So that has not changed at all. We do plan, we would like to time our visits to Farmgate and Farmgate Plus facilities to observe slaughter when we can. So we'll do our best for that. We're also providing workshops that are going on as we speak today in some parts of the province. I think they're either on the island or the Sunshine Coast to assist with, just support that slaughter right training to give a little bit more technical assistance and instruction. But we would like to see it. It's not always possible. And if the best we can do is inspecting or reviewing the equipment and facilities, then we'll have to make do with that. But we would like to view or see the activity and process when we can. But we're limitations of the number of number of people that we have to cover the whole province. Ideally, yes, I guess is the best way to put it, Kathleen.
This is Tara Despo. She's a water resource specialist with the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fisheries. After a number of years working in groundwater authorizations at the Ministry of Forests, Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development, Tara has gained a wealth of knowledge and experience working with groundwater licensing in BC and has worked closely with agricultural producers acquiring their licenses. Throughout her time at both ministries, she has also been doing outreach work and presentations with various agricultural producer groups on the requirement to license existing non-domestic groundwater use. So Tara, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Mara. I'll just share my screen now. And can you see that okay? Okay, great. So yeah, I'm a water resource specialist with the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Fishery. And today what I aim to do is give you a brief overview of the fast approaching requirement for existing groundwater users to license their agricultural water use. The deadline to do that is March 1st. That's next Tuesday at midnight. And by doing so, you're going to be able to secure your water rights and your historical priority date. Okay, so just a little bit of background on this is that on February 29th, 2016, the province enacted the Water Sustainability Act, and that brought in the requirement to license groundwater use. Before that, groundwater users actually just were not able to get a license. So into the Water Sustainability Act, the province built in a bit of a transition period to give those existing users the opportunity to actually have their use recognized. So existing groundwater users must apply, as I said, by March 1st. That's 4 days away, and will be unable to apply for existing use after that deadline. Instead, after that, they're going to have to apply as a new user. So by applying for existing use, there's a few benefits to that. By applying before the deadline, the application fee for existing use groundwater use is waived. So that's at least $250. There's also the benefit that your historical rights are recognized, and that refers to the priority date, which would be used in first in time, first in right situations. So let's say there's a water scarcity issue in your area or near your stream, and the province chooses to enact a temporary protection order and limit water use. Your priority date would be recognized in that case. And then finally, a big benefit is that by applying for existing use, there's less scrutiny on your application because the impacts to streams, aquifers, and other users have generally already been felt by water that has already been used for some time. So if the province does consider your use new use because you've missed that deadline, you may and likely will be required to provide additional information to support that water is actually available for you to use. So to start your application, actually before you start your application, what we would suggest for you to do is to register for a basic BC electronic ID. That's a BCID. You can go to bceid.ca to register for that. And just write down your username and password and have that ready before you start your application on the Front Counter BC website. What that's going to allow you to do is actually save your application and go back to it if you need to. And then once you've actually submitted it, you can also go back and check the status of it. So where it is in line and if it's under technical review. And then to apply for a license, there's some documents that you should get together before actually starting the process. I see there's a hand up. Maybe I can wait until the end of the presentation to answer that. So there's a few documents that you'd need to apply. The first would be to have ready with you is the BC assessment notice or property tax notice. And everyone's going to have that. It probably came pretty recently for most of you in the past month or two. And have that just ready next to your computer that has all the legal information about your property. If you're not the sole owner of your farm or your ranch, you'll need an owner's agreement letter so that you can show that the co-owners of your property are agreeing to the license being applied for. You can do this in a couple of ways. You can either have a signed letter ready to upload to the system, but you can also do it by email through the actual application process itself, which I think is the path at this point that I would recommend for most people, because by doing that, you'll actually be able to submit your application and pay while waiting for those co-owners to respond to that consent email. Then you'll need a well construction report or other proof of first use of your groundwater. So that could be a simple signed letter from yourself or your neighbor, just stating, to the best of your knowledge, my groundwater was used since this date for this purpose, or my well was constructed in this year and has been used since. And then finally, just to note, there's a lot of information that you'll have to enter into the application, and you can have this all consolidated in one place very easily by generating a report in the BC Agriculture Water Calculator. So what that gives you is it's going to summarize for you and for the water officer who's working on your file the legal information about your property, so the PID, the property identifier. You'll also have the water use calculations, the areas to be irrigated or types of crop, or the number of animals and type of animals that you have on your farm, details of the work, and it also is going to provide you with a site plan, which is something that the province is going to want to see as well. And then finally, once you have all that information in hand, you can start your application. And you would do that by going to groundwater.gov.bc.ca. And that's, you're going to choose then the middle option here, which is groundwater existing use. So that's use that started before March 1st, 2016. Okay, so that's just kind of the rundown of what you need to apply. But I wanted to also go through with you just kind of a quick demo of the BC Agriculture Water Calculator, because it's an excellent tool and kind of gets you set for starting your application so that you have all your information in hand there. So this is what it looks like. So it starts by opening to just a map of British Columbia. And to find your property, you can do that in a few ways. You can zoom in just using the scroller on your mouse, or you can use the zoom in and zoom out arrows on the top left-hand side here, or you can actually search for the PID or your address or place name here. Now, I have I have my colleague's farm up in Hazelton to show you today. So I'll just type in that PID number. All right, so here it is. So the first thing that I'm going to do once I've found it, I'm going to click on it to make sure that that's the one. Ooh, for some reason, it's not clicking for me here. So let me just refresh that. Let me try that again.
Hey, Tara, I noticed that if you're in the Make a Diagram tab, it won't let you click on it. You have to be in one of the other tabs.
Okay, thanks, Carla. And Carla is right. Carla is my colleague. So there we go. So we have Andrew's property selected here. And the next thing I'd like to do is just look at the land in satellite view. And the reason for that is that if you have any irrigated fields or any barns on the property, you'll be able to see that through the aerial view. And we're going to be making a diagram. So that makes it also easy to kind of trace out the irrigated area or put a point on that barn or building that you need to identify. So you have the property selected. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start making our diagram. We'll do this first, just so that we can identify the areas that we would need for the calculations. So you'll notice that on this farm, there's this purple dot, and purple dots on this map identify registered wells. So registered is different than licensing. Registered just means that the province knows where has a record of where your well is, but it doesn't mean it has a license associated with it or that they know anything about the water use associated with it. So this gives you a well tag number, the depth of the well drilled, and coordinates. And there's also this little button called Well Report here. So if you click that, it will actually bring you to the Groundwater Wells and Aquifers Provincial Database. And in here, you have all different information about your well. You have, again, the well tag number, owner information, coordinates, the construction date. It will give you a well log as well sometimes. And then if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's sometimes this document is available, which would be your well record. So if you don't have a paper copy of your well construction report and your well happens to be registered already, then you might be able to find that here. So what you would do is save that document. You can do that just by pressing the download button. I'm in the Chrome browser today, so I would just click this down arrow and save that to my computer for upload into my application. And then you can also, what I would suggest doing is clicking the print button at the top of this well summary page as well for upload into the application. And you can save that as a PDF. So when it gives you the option to print, just choose Save PDF instead and save that. Now, in reviewing the information in that well record, if there's anything that you notice that's off, you can also choose to submit feedback about this well. And you can just note it here, say the well location is off or the well was abandoned a while ago and it's no longer in use, that type of thing you can add into here. Another thing I would do with the well is to actually overlap it with a well point, just because right now this point is going to show up on your map plan, but by putting a point in, it's also going to allow you to add a description for it. So you can say farm well, and then you can say it's 178 feet deep. And the location is going to be on there as well. So when you actually go to generate a report, all that information is going to show up for your well, just so it's there for ease of access for whoever's working on your file and also for you to refer back to when you're doing your application. So we have the well in there. And the next thing that we'll do is identify any any buildings like a barn or irrigated area that we're using. So we'll say the barn is here. This is our chicken barn, let's say.
Tara,
And
about another 2 minutes or so?
okay, yeah,
Possible?
yeah, yeah. And then you'll choose the irrigated area. So I'll just quickly outline this. Forage. And we'll put this in hectares because that's what the system is going to use online. And then put a pipeline in. So we'll just put that main line through where we go. You can name that as well. And then when you're going to go to calculate, I'll just show you irrigation quickly and then go to livestock. So if you do have any irrigated area, you'll put in just what's highlighted in what you've drawn. So let's say 9 hectares here. You'll choose your crop. The soil is a default, but if you know it to be different than what it shows here, you can change that. You're going to change the irrigation type to correspond to what you use. And then the growing season is according to the climate information that the province has. And generally, we can say that's April 1st to September 30th. And then you're going to put the water demand in cubic meters. So that's for irrigation. Then you can add another field if you'd like to. And then similarly, if you go to livestock, you just choose the type of animal you have. I think we said chickens in this case, which are poultry, say broiler chickens. Let's say we have 100. We'll put the water demand again in cubic meters. And then it will give you the annual water demand down here. You can also add another type of animal to your report. And the final thing that you're going to do is go to save your report, choose irrigation and livestock, generate the report. Just a couple seconds here. Just want to show you what it's going to give you in the end, and then I'll be done. So you'll see it's just a summary of all the information that you've put in to calculate, which is very helpful to whoever's doing the review of your file so they know where you got your numbers from. It gives you your annual water demand for each use and your total water demand. It gives you this nice diagram, which the province is going to want to see. And then finally, it gives you just the map annotations for any for the irrigated area, the dwelling, just gives you all the information about all of those. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Tara. Do you have any closing words, or are you good? I don't want to cut you off.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
just a reminder that the application deadline for existing use groundwater is on Tuesday of next week, March 1st.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tara. Steve had a question.
Yeah, my question was just with the BCID, if the application is not in my name because I'm doing it for my family who actually live on a neighboring property, I was hoping to use my BCID to make the application just so I can save it essentially. Mm-hmm. Is that going to present a problem?
What you can do is if you're going to file it on their behalf and do the whole application for them, then you can get them just to sign kind of a letter of agent for you, just them stating that they approve of you acting on their behalf for the purposes of the license application.
But I can't just put their names as the lead applicant, even though it's through that portal.
That's a good question, actually. I mean, I think that if they're no, I think it would have to be through their own BCID.
Okay. Well, maybe he'll be able to find the password to his. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Mary Jane, you had a question, and Heidi, I see yours in the chat.
Yes. So we had a 5-acre property that we had livestock on. And we bought a 57-acre property that we've built a layer barn on, a small layer barn for a small permit. And we had some of the cows grazing on the property, but we hauled water for them. There was no hookup to the well. We purchased the property about the middle of April of 2016. We sold the 5 acres September of 2020. So it sounds like I did talk to someone with the Ministry of Forests, and they said that I have to put in a new application because I don't fall under the existing application part of it. So
Yeah, so if the existing use, what qualifies you for that is if you have been using, or if the previous property owner had been using water for the same purpose since prior to the enactment of the Water Sustainability Act in 2016. So even if the former property owner was using the water, then you can claim that as existing use. It doesn't have to be you who is using it, but if no one was using well water at that time, then that would require a new use license. So that the deadline does not apply for that, but you would still need a license for that.
So then do I have to apply back to, say, 2018 when we started using it, or do I do it from the day that I apply?
No, you would do it from the day that you apply. That's what your priority date would be. They would not give you an older priority date than the date that your application is accepted by Front Counter.
Okay, thank you.
Tara, could I ask you if you could maybe personally answer these questions in chat? We need to move on. And Corinne, I see your hand raised. Can it be really brief? We're running over time. I'm glad it's a good conversation. Corinne?
Sorry, I have a quick question about demystifying groundwater versus surface water.
Sure.
For wells that are very shallow. Like, how do we know what constitutes groundwater?
So if it's water from a well, it's groundwater. So anything that's below the surface of the ground is considered groundwater under the Water Sustainability Act. A stream or surface water would be like a river. It could be a spring that comes up above surface where you collect water. A lake, that would be surface water. But anything below ground, if it's collected by a well or a dugout that refills on its own, then that would be groundwater as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So it is my job now and pleasure, I'm sure, to introduce Anders Hopperstead. He is the Senior Premises ID Program Analyst for the Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and what might have formerly been Fisheries and is not anymore. Anders has served with the BC provincial government since 2012 and joined the Premises ID program team in 2013. Anders has 25 years of experience in geographic information systems, GIS analysis, and digital map making. He is based out of the Abbotsford Agricultural Center in Abbotsford and lives with his family in Mission. And Anders, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Mara, and this is a pleasure. And from my bio, hopefully folks can understand that everything I've learned about agriculture and livestock and animal diseases, I've learned through events like this and through my great colleagues and talking to farmers and producers across the province on the phone, because my career has been focused on geographic information and map making. So that I'm really grateful for opportunities like this to learn even more from people who are raising livestock and dealing with these issues. And so in that context, it's been great that Tara and Gavin have already touched upon our program a little bit, and thank you so much for referencing it. I find, the title was what can Premises ID do for you? And it's one of these, like, the background of Premises ID it comes from a serious foot and mouth disease outbreak in 2001 in the United Kingdom on the island of Britain. Had that terrible event not happened, we may not have a premises ID program here in Canada. I may not be in this career, but that event was so catastrophic, and folks may or may not remember it. It started 21 years ago, actually this month, but almost 6 million animals on the island of Britain ended up having to be euthanized. It had devastating long-term impacts on their agricultural industry, on tourism, etc. And it prompted nations around the world, and particularly those close to Britain, to start preparing to prevent such a disaster in their country. And so in Canada, it led to the establishment of the National Agri-Food and Traceability System in 2006, which was a sort of a commitment of the federal government, the provinces, national industry associations, and such, to build a traceability system that would hopefully be able to respond to something as catastrophic as foot and mouth disease. And that was launched by the Harper government at the time. Of course, now it's 2022, and now that over time it's been evolving. The traceability systems have been evolving. Different provinces have made components of the program mandatory. Particularly the premises ID component has been mandatory in Alberta since 2009, Manitoba since 2009, and now here in British Columbia, we're taking that step too, so that we can be good neighbors to our other provincial partners, and also hopefully do the best for the producers in British Columbia in response to disasters. So that's the historical background that's really important. Now, what we've also noticed, of course, is that the premises ID program, because of the geographic information that comes out that's so accurate and useful, it also has a role in natural disaster, events. And that, was not really anticipated back in 2006 when this whole thing got started, but it's continuing to be valuable, as Gavin referred to, during wildfire events and such. So in answer to the question, what can the premises ID program do for you? Hopefully nothing, right? Because hopefully there aren't any terrible disease outbreaks, and hopefully your farm is never threatened by a natural disaster. But hope is not a strategy. And so we need to be prepared in case it is, and that's why we're here. So I'll just launch. I have a few slides, and I can hopefully hit the right button to share my screen. Here. And here we go. Okay, we'll go to the next slide here. This first slide, I'll move through these really quickly so we do have time for questions, because I really want to interact and field those. But I think this is great. It almost refers back to Tara's first presentation. So, premises IDs themselves are these random 9-digit codes. They start with 2 letters signifying the province, because it's a federal program. So all of our BC premises IDs start with BC. And here you have the BC Livestock Producers Co-op in Kamloops facility, and they've put their premises IDs right on a sign out on the gate there for folks, submitting movement reports. But you'll notice in parentheses there how they put PID. Okay, so this is just luck of the draw here in British Columbia. That PID acronym was already being used by BC Land Titles. And so, you heard Tara referring to it in her presentation, that you could use it to search your property for your groundwater license. But premises ID is something else. And so BC Livestock Producers, because they work with animals coming in and out of Alberta. In Alberta, when people talk about premises ID, they almost always say PID. But here in British Columbia, we have to be really careful to distinguish the two. And it's just a source of confusion that we have to bear with a smile. Premises ID and PID are not the same thing in British Columbia. This is a slide showing the 3 components of the livestock traceability system. Premises ID being the where, the identification of parcels. animal ID being the who, the tagging of animals, et cetera, and then animal movement being the when. When does an animal or herd or flock move from one premises to another premises or eventually to processing and such. And so the other thing we're demonstrating on this slide is that the premises ID program is a provincial program, because early on in the establishment of these national traceability systems, it was determined that it was very complicated for the federal government to figure out all the different land titles and addressing situations used across the country. And so they asked the provinces to take that on, thinking that our provincial governments would have the best resources to handle that efficiently and effectively. But the other parts of the traceability system are administered by national organizations affiliated with a different species. So you're going to hear soon from Jeff Clark, affiliated with PigTrace, other organizations, Canadian Cattle Identification Agency for beef cattle, Dairy Trace for dairy cattle, and et cetera. And there's potentially systems evolving for sheep and goats and farm deer as well, and bison. So that's the evolution of that. And it is strictly used for emergency management purposes. So we've used it only for things like avian influenza, other disease outbreaks, and for natural disaster response. And this is strictly laid out in the BC Animal Health Act. And we protect the information very carefully, to build that trust, because trust is essential to the success of this program. So, when there are disease events, then there's sort of an idea of like finding out farms that are nearby and they may be notified of such. One of the other ways it's become relevant in wildfire response in particular is that it vets livestock producers whose premises end up falling inside of evacuation order or evacuation alert boundaries. And so by then having a premises ID affiliated with your farm, you can hopefully go to the local emergency operations center and potentially get a re-entry permit, because then the BC Wildfire Service and RCMP or anybody else involved in enforcing that evacuation order boundary can see the location of the farm, know that you're there to take care of your animals, see whether or not it's safe given where the current fire line is, and then allow you to use a re-enter to care for your animals. That's been used in the Caribou, used in Thompson-Nicola, and there are other regional districts and local governments around the province looking to use premises ID for that vetting of reentry permits and during disasters as well. Not a guarantee, of course, depending on the nature of the fire, but it has proven to be really valuable in that role. The information collected is very simple: emergency contact information, location, and the number of animals. The last bullet on the slide, the maximum capacity of animals on the site. One of the most frequently asked questions. Of course, the number of animals on a premises fluctuates throughout the year, but we're just trying to get a sense of the scale of the operation. So it's not important whether you have 6 or 7 cows on your farm, it's do you have 6 or 600, right? And so we try to get a sense. And that way, emergency responders have a sense of how big that operation is. If there were an actual emergency impacting your premises, the responders would contact the operators to figure out how many animals were there on that particular day. And just simply, it's free. We have a really efficient online registration system that's been designed based on the Alberta registration system. Most people say it takes them less than 10 minutes to register. It's been very successful. You can still also register by paper if you don't use the internet, or you can even call us and we'll assist you with the registration. And again, emphasizing this is only for emergency management. This first slide, I think we've sort of covered this in the conversation, that this is the rationale behind it and the purposes. This presentation, Julia has already uploaded to the resources page for this conference, so feel free to browse it at your convenience. But there you see at the bottom, our neighboring provinces of Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba have all chosen to go mandatory with this program, and Quebec and Prince Edward Island have as well. So British Columbia is looking to become the 6th province in the country to do that. We're only really interested in livestock and poultry. We're not interested in cats and dogs or anything like that. We're looking into animals that are typical in farming operations. But I think this is important to note. Not all these animals are going to have traceability systems associated with them, but they still may be relevant. So for example, llamas, right? I mean, there isn't any ideas right now for a llama traceability system in Canada, but llamas can be carriers of foot and mouth disease. So knowing, that a llama is on a premises could be relevant in a disease event. And the folks who are being required to register will be the ones who are in care of the animals or commingling site operators, et cetera, with these things. So we're just hoping people understand that this is really about being prepared, being a good neighbor, having your animals sort of known to emergency responders in the event of a disaster, and making it as simple as possible, and then of course earning your trust by using the data only for emergency management purposes.
Thank you, Anders.
You're welcome.
Any questions?
We don't have any animals right now and haven't for a couple of years, so I might be out of the loop on this specifically, but we had sheep and we had to get ear tags through, I think it was through CFIA. Is that harmonized with the premises ID system, or is that still like a separate premises registration than the tracing the ear tags?
Yeah. So what usually it's one of the ways we people end up registering. It's a cross compliance type of thing. So a premises ID issued by your province would be what the CCIA, Canadian Cattle Identification, or I think it's the Canadian Sheep Identification Program, would be looking for. They're not doing something separate, and that's actually a really good point. It's the same tag for your or premises ID for your sheep as it would be for the cows, as it would be for the pigs or chickens or any animals on your premises. And so yes, that's supposed to be a universal anonymous code referring to the location of the animals. So yes, if you did end up getting sheep again, you may get asked for a premises ID when purchasing tags. Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
This is Jeff Clark. Jeff is the director of PigTrace Canada with the Canadian Pork Council. Jeff has been involved with the design, development, and implementation of Canada's swine traceability system called PigTrace since 2005. First as the Manitoba Pork Council representative on the Canadian Pork Council's National Traceability Committee. Sorry about that. That was my timer for Anders, but he ended right on time. Jeff was first on the Canadian Pork Council's National Traceability Committee. Then he became the national director of the program in 2009. PigTrace became mandatory in 2014. Jeff holds a Bachelor's of Science degree from the University of Winnipeg, as well as a master's degree in natural resource management from the University of Manitoba, where he conducted an extensive research project focused on the genetic composition of and habitat availability for woodland caribou in West Central Manitoba. Thanks for being here, Jeff.
Thanks, Mara. And yeah, every time I hear that bio read out, I remind myself it needs to be shortened up. So that part about habitat connectivity with woodland caribou, I think is really relevant because a big part of that's network analysis to see how habitat connects. And it's the same type of stuff I've been doing with traceability lately, last 2 or 3 years, I guess, but we'll get to that. I guess Julia, and thanks Julia for inviting me again. I think it's a real nice collaboration we've had between Canadian Pork Council PigTrace program and the Small Scale Meat Producers Association. I really enjoyed meeting with all of you. So yeah, as Mara said, I run the program for Canada. I also serve as the industry co-chair with government on our National Advisory Committee on Traceability, and Anders gave a great background. Thanks, Anders, for kind of setting the stage for all of this. So this is really, and when I meet with other countries, I mean, the US is trying to pick our brain on the pork side on how we do this. Our collaboration between industry, federal and provincial governments, I think it's easily taken for granted, but it shouldn't be. It's been a real amazing partnership, and Anders and I work closely, and thanks Anders for all your work and support on the BC Premises Site Identification Program. And the acronym, as Anders pointed out, PID is a nasty word in British Columbia. I don't use it there. I try not to use it anywhere else because there is some confusion, but I'll rip ahead here. And Mara, I'm going to try to aim 15 minutes here. I have way more than that in terms of slides. I'm going to go fast, everyone. So if it bores you, go to sleep. If you're interested, pay attention. The purpose of livestock traceability, I'll go through that a bit. Anders gave you a bit of the multi-species vision for Canada, so this isn't just a pig thing. What's PigTrace? How did we develop it? And then what's happening today? It's a real exciting time for me to just get on the cusp of using some of the data. I'm trying to bring on some more staff to really drive this a bit further. We can do some really amazing thing with the information we have. The compliance monitoring piece, it's not a real heavy-handed program. There is a law behind it, but trying to really promote the usefulness of the program for commercial producers as well as small scale. What's this all about? And then finally, and COVID's been a great stage setter for this, doing some disease modeling, looking for network influencers, what type of operations in Canada are maybe high risk for spreading disease. But we'll get to that later. So I'm going to rip through this real quick because I think Anders gave a real good overview, but traceability is really just the ability to trace something and know where it came from, what else may have it come in contact with. In this case, we're talking about animals. Premises identification is a huge part of that. So, typically on the disease management or food safety side, you find something, you trace it back. Where did it come from? Okay, we think it came from there. Where did it go to? So avian influenza is a hot topic right now that we're dealing with. So first and foremost, PigTrace and the other livestock traceability programs in Canada are focused on disease management. You could echo that for food safety. We don't have much of those issues these days, touch wood. But if you had a contaminant in meat or an animal, same would apply here. You do a trace back, trace forward. This is just, I've been doing this kind of network analysis work for a couple of years now. But really, this is what all domestic movements look like in Canada. We're able to look at the premises, which are the dots, what province are they in. This is real high level stuff, but we can, peel back the layers of the onion. But just knowing where movements come from, where they're going to, what's the high traffic routes in Canada. You see a real natural divide here between Western Canada. And these are not geographic. These are just the dots coalesce based on the frequency of movements and kind of a network, how close is that community. So the prairie provinces, red, orange, and yellow, really coalesce together. British Columbia, light blue out on the west coast, and then you have the east coast. So it's Canada's naturally, you could say there's a divide between, along Rocky Mountains and then central Canada. This type of stuff, and I don't really have a slide on it, but I've done consultations with other governments around Canada. So the Japanese are really interested in what we're doing. Met with their government in December. They're coming here in March, both to the Lower Fraser Valley and then here to Manitoba, which I am in Manitoba. And we're doing a lot of negotiations with them for bilateral agreement. In the event we get African swine fever in Canada, which is a hot topic, could we continue to trade? So this stuff is absolutely critical. I know most of you on this call don't maybe care so much about the export market, but that is a huge economic driver in Canada in terms of the pork production. About 70% of our production is exported out of Canada, and that sustains a lot of jobs. And it's important to some people. I don't know if it's important to you. And some days it's important to me, but this is what I do. So why do traceability? So again, what I said, animal health is paramount, food safety as well. There's some intangibles that I'll get to later on, but really response time is critical. Like I said, the market impact, economic impact to Canada is huge. For pork, beef would be another one, really export dependent. So really it's, and even on the small scale side, some small scale producers ask me, why should I care about this? Well, if you're in a region of Canada that's completely locked down, you're not moving your pigs. So the quicker we can get back to identifying the disease, the quicker people can get back to moving their pigs. And I often equate it to, here in Winnipeg, we had a spinach recall a few months ago again. The quicker you can identify where contaminants come from, the quicker you can get back to normal. So this affects all of us. It's not just, the big players that are exporting pork. This is anyone moving pigs in Canada. And I should include pet pig owners in that as well, which I'll come back to. But we're keeping this high level multi-species right now. There's big money involved. Anders referred to foot and mouth disease in the UK, and that did really help kick this off, along with classical swine fever in the Netherlands around that same time in the early 2000s. We're talking big money here. Emotional impact. I've talked to people from the UK who went through this. There were suicides. I know a guy who was a cop at the time in the UK, and it was brutal. There's losses to tourism. It's not just an agricultural thing. So we don't want disease like this in Canada. On the multi-species side, again, Anders touched on this, but there's a federal regulation that governs animal movement. Right now, pigs are the only ones that are full-blown traceability in terms of animal ID and movement reporting. Some of you may have cattle and sheep and goats. There's animal identification requirements. Premises ID is absolutely a huge part of all this. And thank you to provincial governments for getting involved, because I've been on this file long enough to remember when on the pork side, we were looking at doing our own premises registries. It differs by province, but here in Manitoba, it would cost me $5 per land title lookup to actually verify land titles. On the pork side, we've been doing premises registration since I've been on board in 2005, but it's important to get that information verified. So that's what Anders and his colleagues offer, which is super, super critical. And I should just point out, when we talk about traceability, it's livestock, not meat. Meat traceability is a whole other thing that I won't get into, but PigTrace can dovetail into that real nicely. It's really up to the processor and what they do with their marketing channels. Again, and Anders talked to this, the 3 pillars: locations, identifying animals, and report the movement. It's that simple, really. Again, premises registration. On the pig side, we're a little different than the other species. We have individual identification like the other species do, and that's an internationally recognized animal identifier, the ear tag. The number coding on there is internationally recognized, so each country has its different code. Canada's 124, in the States it's 840, and I don't know other countries because we don't really deal with them. But for pigs, something really important to point out is we have a group identifier as well we could use instead, and that's we call it a herd mark. It can be applied as a tattoo. We can print it on a tag. That's very useful for the pig sector. And then, of course, movement reporting. And I'll just point out the pig sector is really different, where we have dual reporting. So both the move out and the move in need to be reported. Other species are looking at just reporting the move in. For us, the dual reporting has really served us well, because we can validate the information. So if I move pigs to Anders and don't report it, but he does, at least we're getting part of it. We can see that I'm non-compliant. So we have compliance monitoring that we do as well. Again, multi-species side, and I'm running on time here, so I'm going to rip through, but I think just what I really want to enforce here is there's been a lot of work done through the years to try to make this a multi-species, multi-government effort. I think we're still doing a good job. CCIA, some of you will know, for cattle, sheep, bison. Dairy has their own dairy trace program. They're branching off. It is official now, I guess. We're still waiting for some regulatory changes. Canadian Pork Council runs the PigTrace program, and then in the province of Quebec, they'll run their own traceability program with provincial regulations that are recognized by the federal government for other species aside from pigs. So we're waiting for some regulatory changes to come. Those have been on hold since 2015, and COVID hasn't helped. We'll see. This impacts the small scale community, because I've put forward some changes that'll make life, I hope, better for small scale producers and other parts of the value chain. So for example, I don't know if any of you do suckling pigs. So I know in British Columbia, and I've been at restaurants that will serve you a small pig on a platter. We don't have that here in Manitoba so much, but that's a market, and not many consumers will want to see an ear tag or a hole in an ear or a slap tattoo on that meal presented to you. So we've had pushback and we've known about this. Animal identification requirements on a small pig like that aren't ideal. So we're presented to the federal government. Can we look at other things like the movement manifest, or as long as we're getting the movement information, can we do some exemptions? Similar things for small scale, similar things for 4-H, which I also kind of consider small scale, but we've had some nuances there. But anyway, we're waiting because we've had some ideas to negotiate with the feds. What is PigTrace? And I'm going to try to keep this to 5 minutes. I've lost a lot of time here, but yeah, 2014, Mara said that we've been, mandatory program. Canadian Pork Council is the national administrator for pigs. Administrators are listed in the regulations, so there's 4 today, and I went through them there. We have, in Quebec, dairy, cattle, and pigs nationally. And I'll just point out, I don't know if this interests most of you, but my experience with PigTrace, I've met many small-scale producers in Canada. I have a slide on that. More than half of our farms registered are small-scale. Of course, not everyone has pigs all the time, but I mean, we have registered them with premises identification numbers and so on. And so I've, starting in 2015-16, I've started saying to my colleagues and our directors who are farmers, we need to do more to serve the small-scale community in Canada. So our Canadian Pork Excellence Program right now consists of 3 programs: PigTrace, PigSafe, which is on-farm food safety, and PigCare, which is animal care. And there's other peripheral programs to that, like biosecurity and training. And so we're growing that platform. But within our PigSafe, PigCare programs, there is a small-scale producer manual. I should have had the link here. I'd be happy to provide it afterwards. And we do, like, this program can be offered to small scale producers as well. It's all about proving and showing people what we're doing on farm in terms of animal care, food safety. Traceability is mandatory, so everyone needs to do it. But I just wanted to give that plug there, just to say that, thanks to the small scale community for bringing it to my attention, how many of you there are, not just in British Columbia, but across Canada. And I'm very committed to, making that work for all of us. And it's not been easy in some cases, but we're seeing movement there. And then I just give the plug again to the National Industry Government Advisory Committee I mentioned. Canadian Pork Council, we're a national organization composed of all our provincial councils. BC Pork is a real small organization. So when you talk about PigTrace, I'm running it for British Columbia. I have an assistant, Miriam Manswell, who some of you may have been in contact with. If you have pigs, you would have been. Miriam's really, almost her full-time job's been servicing small-scale producers in Canada, but we didn't expect that, but we've been doing it. And so Canadian Pork Council is comprised of directors from each of the provinces. So directors are farmers. So I work for farmers. We set national policy for our national programs, like I mentioned, for Canadian Pork Excellence. Developing PigTrace was a long slog, and I won't recap that. Those were some rough years, but I'm happy to see that we have a program. Requirements, registration, and there's, premise ID is a huge part of that. So if you register with us, as was the sheep question, we don't want to duplicate stuff. Yeah, we'll have to register with you with PigTrace. All we need is your premises ID number, your name, phone number, email, if you have it, mailing address, if you're going to buy tags from us. And to cut to the chase here, the requirements are, if you're going to move pigs, you need to report it to our national system within 7 days after the movement. And that includes if you receive pigs. In some cases, you need pig identifiers. For the most part, if you're moving pigs farm to farm, they don't need any identification. But if you're moving pigs to slaughter, they'll need an ear tag or a herd mark, shoulder slap, or tattoo. So this little spray paint idea here, this came from, and I lobbied for it, and some of you may have been on my mailing list where I got fed up with the federal government, and I was like, okay, well, I'll let our 8,000 small scale producers ask for it. And we did a huge email blast and pretty much email bombed my federal government colleague who was giving me trouble to say, hey, we need some other way to identify pigs. Some people don't like putting an ear tag in a pig's ear because of animal welfare concerns. So let's look for something else. Same for tattoos. tattoos don't work on dark-haired, dark-skinned pigs very well. So this is a valid, so the spray paint thing that you'll see on the right here, non-toxic, food-safe spray paint. It's commonly available for livestock. It is a valid form of identification. And that was really pushed to serve the small-scale community and give you an alternative. I would say if you're considering that, check with your processor. Some plants, there's a business side to this too. They don't want that paint in their facility. That's their call. But it is commonly used on all livestock. I mean, people color mark their pig or their animals all the time. I'm at 1:20 Pacific time, so I don't know, Mara. I'm gonna rip through quick pictures of our ear tags. It's all on our website. PigTrace is often criticized for being confusing because in some cases you need a tag, in some cases you don't. If I had it my way, you would never need an ear tag. Movement reporting data is absolutely the gold that we're after. Who's involved with PigTrace? Canadian Food Inspection Agency enforces it. There are financial penalties ultimately if you don't participate. It's a very collaborative educational program. Fines have not been used other than one jerk I know in Ontario very well. So to date, in the last, pushing 8 years, we have over 5 million movement events. We have over 18,000 premises registered, a lot of them farms. Of those 1,700 registered in British Columbia, only 17 are commercial, or what, I don't even know what commercial or small scale means. Like the definition is whatever. But if generally I think of a commercial producer, you ship to a federal plant. So that would be the facility in Richmond, Ritco. But a vast majority of British Columbia producers are small scale, and it's my commitment to make it work. We've seen a growing number of movement reports sent to us, and really trying to get that movement delay as close to real time as possible. That's been our focus in the last couple of years, with some hiccups. But small lot pork producer manual, BC government put one out. I mentioned earlier, the Canadian Pork Council also partnered with the Canadian Swine Vets of Canada. There's one that's put out, real good resources for anyone starting out in pigs. And just real quick here, use of data. So I'm using it in COVID, again, good example, to identify high risk movements, doing some predictive modeling. I wish I had a ton more time with this. I'm in the process of trying to bring on some staff to free me up to do some of this stuff, but we have such great information that we can use to predict how disease might spread, predict movements, identify high risk movements. StatCan I've been working with for the last couple of years. Any of you that do farm surveys with Statistics Canada, no one likes doing them. StatsCan hates calling people and asking for information. So they've been working with a few different commodity groups, not just livestock, to look at what other data exists that we could use to predict on-farm animal inventory or crop yields without having to bug people all the time. So I'm gonna leave it there, just other than to say we are watching, we're doing compliance monitoring, we're starting to do outreach. If you're not doing PigTrace, how can we help? Is it confusing? If you ignore us or flip us the bird, eventually we'll refer you to CFIA and you'll get some letters from them and maybe a fine. But I'll stop there. Any questions? Or I guess that's maybe the group questions.
Any questions for Jeff?
Hi, Jeff. We've talked before a few times over the years. Still having a challenge, and I noticed today when I went on to track some of my animals to put my data in, that the interface keeps on changing. And now I can't go back and check on any previous events and or change anything. So that has been a constant source of frustration for me doing this. And
are you using your phone, Julia, or is it a mobile?
No, I'm not.
Platform?
No, I am using my iPad now to do it.
Yeah,
but I haven't.
So that's a disaster. I'll just stop you right there. So I apologize first of all. For the last 2 years, I've been trying to free up money to build a true app. The mobile platform, especially on Apple devices, is a shit show. Don't even waste your time. And there's a lot of technical reasons why. There's a a lot of it's Apple related, and I've been previously a huge Apple fan, but I don't have an answer for you other than say that's not going to work right now, and I'm working at it.
Okay, so I need to go and find my old computer and fire that up and use that.
If you have another device, that would be great. iPad, you could go to desktop mode, but it's just been so buggy on Apple devices. Yeah. And so I'm hoping in this calendar year, I've created an Apple App Store account, Google, like I'm laying the groundwork to develop a true app that'll be stable. It is absolutely not stable right now, and it's frustrating for me.
Okay, and for us.
Yeah, oh, okay, I know.
Thank you very much.
Jeff, I think it's pretty clear that you're working hard to make changes happen on all sorts of different levels. And one was the spray ID marks. It's pretty clear that that was a battle that you were willing to fight. Laurie Sims asks, how permanent are the spray ID marks? And is there any chance they will come to cattle?
Oh yeah, and I had a fight not just with the feds, but even my own colleagues who just did not want to even introduce that. But I was fervent to like have to give people options, right? The cattle side, I don't represent them in any way, but person to person, I'd probably say there's no friggin' chance that's ever coming to cattle, but let them speak for themselves. And then the permanency, it's not going to last very long. So you need to be careful. And I do have kind of a protocol. I mean, you know, if you're going to use this and ship them to slaughter, you should apply it as soon as possible before you ship the animals. We say do it along the back because it will rub off. It is water resistant-ish, but it will come off. So it's not a permanent identifier. But I like the option of presenting it because, you know, some people don't want to hurt their pigs, or they don't want to permanently mark their pigs or put a hole in the ear. So, you know, and I'm still continue to look for other options to identify animals. So I hope that answers the question.
That is great. And we appreciate you're also working so hard to keep us on time. That was a great panel of 4 speakers. And I think everybody's made it pretty clear that they're open to people getting in touch with them if you have direct questions. So I think at this point, it would be really good for us to stop it there and thank everybody. Anders and Jeff and Tara and Gavin, great insight that you gave us to lots of very practical questions. And I want to give kudos to the Small Scale Meat Producers Association of BC Board of Directors that put together that panel and asked everybody to speak so quickly and so succinctly on what they had to say. Given that, also want to encourage anybody who's not already a member of the SSMPA BC to join. I think together there's a lot of learning that can be done, and a lot of advocacy that can be done for the sector. So I put that link in the chat, and that gives everybody 1 minute to stand up and take a break, but don't go anywhere because emergency preparedness happens in 2 minutes.